Updates on Benjamin Sesko, Joao Neves, and Amadou Onana. As we jump into today's Arsenal transfer show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal transfer show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. Hope you've had a fantastic week so far. It's Thursday, which means the weekend is in sight. And indeed, if you could drop a like on the video, that would be incredibly appreciated. Please do just press that thumbs up button and help us to 1K every single day, and we continue to push forward with our sub goal of the Emirates Stadium capacity by the end of 2024. We reached 57,000 on the channel the other day, and we've already picked up basically another 200 subscribers since then. So we're on something of a roll. So please do, if you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for tuning in. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box: Blackshine, Knowledge, Steve, Rowan, Rich, Jackie, Matt G, Kish, Glenn, Damien, Colton, Luke, Martin, Darren and SW, Mr. SNLO. We've got Answer and Maximius and Shari. We've got Arasilki, Amesy, Mike, Stevie, Red Star, and plenty more of you guys and girls and Morgie. Thank you to you all tuning in. I hope you are doing good and doing well. Let's jump into today's stories, shall we? We start with Leandro Trossard scoring for Belgium in their game against Montenegro as their continuation of their preparations ahead of the European Championships goes on. Of course, Leandro Trossard previously something of a depth option in the Belgian side at previous summer tournaments. But as we go into this summer tournament after the season that he has had, he and Jeremy Doku, of course, leading the way as options for the wide areas to flank Romelu Lukaku. And of course, you've got plenty of other very interesting and I suppose relatively unknown for maybe the majority of players regarding the Belgium squad in particular, because this is probably the first tournament where Belgium haven't got that golden generation, really. I know De Bruyne, of course, and the like will still be around, but, no Eden Hazard, for instance, and some of the old guard of the Belgian national side are no longer there. No Vincent Kompany, no Thomas Vermaelen, although maybe Vermaelen's still in the squad. Has Vermaelen retired? I'm now thinking if Vermaelen's retired or not. He is now 38 years of age, and yes, retired 3 years ago, believe it or not. So, yeah, no, no Thomas Vermaelen in the Belgian side either. It's amazing how time flies. And I remember when he signed for Arsenal. Goodness me. Anyway, the Premier League, according to a number of outlets, are said to potentially be looking at increasing their profit and sustainability regulation losses to 135 million from 105 million. At the current rate, teams are in need of avoiding a 105 million loss over 3 rolling years. That could increase to 135 million pounds to enable greater amounts of spending by Premier League sides under a new revamped system. There's a lot of emphasis, there's a lot of scrutiny, there's a lot of legalities going on surrounding the Premier League's spending rules, as we all very well know and touched upon in great detail yesterday. But again, this story is one that, as it develops, we will continue to bring the latest on. Moving into transfers, and Oleksandr Zinchenko, we know, has been linked to Bayern Munich. However, according to Sky Germany and Florian Pletterberg, the emphasis at the moment is on Bayern keeping Alphonso Davies at the club, despite, of course, interest from Real Madrid. Suggestions are that they still want to try and keep hold of the Canadian international, and that means that any move for Zinchenko is looking unlikely at this stage. It was always thought to be pretty unlikely, and that Bayern was simply monitoring the Ukrainian international situation with his links to Vincent Kompany. There was obvious a pathway, if you like, with that one. But it doesn't seem that as Zinchenko move to Bayern is one that we can expect to happen during this window, but it's not to rule it out entirely, but it doesn't seem all that likely. Now, moving into Arsenal's potential incomings, and we start with Joao Neves, Manchester United. who are also interested alongside Arsenal, are said to have had a bid rejected for the Arsenal transfer target amounting to £51 million. It is said that this £51 million offer, according to Sport, is quite significantly under what Benfica would be looking for the central midfielder, just 19 years of age. Remember, another Benfica central midfielder potentially earning upwards of 100 million for the club if he was to leave. And that is the figure that is being talked about with Joao Neves, which is not something I can foresee Arsenal getting anywhere close to if they were to try and go for Joao Neves during the summer transfer window. But that rejected bid, according to Sport, has kind of put into context what would be needed if anybody wants to get their hands on the 19-year-old midfielder for their squad next season. And the headline act in regards to potential incomings remains, of course, Benjamin Sesko. Conversations are still said to be going on between clubs, between intermediaries with the player, and that a decision is still expected to be made before the European Championships. Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, as we know, all interested. RB Leipzig want to keep him. The only decision that we know that has been made so far is, of course, the fact that Sesko will turn down approaches from Saudi Arabia. The most likely exit remains the Premier League, and it most remains Arsenal as the favoured destination. But let's wait and see for Sesko and see whether or not a move to Arsenal does materialise. But right now, it is the continuation of those conversations and talks for the Slovenian striker. And just one last story for us to discuss. There has been some contact made, supposedly, according to Fabrizio Romano, from Arsenal towards Amadou Onana and Everton. However, the expectation of a deal for the Belgian international remains, at this moment in time, not very likely at all. So let's wait and see what happens with all of these. But it's one of those where, being 6th of June, the updates surrounding these transfers are very much not really too groundbreaking at this stage. But being a daily show, of course, we want to give you all the latest on each one. And those talks continue for Sesko, but there isn't any kind of, developments on any new targets for Arsenal in other areas of the field. Now, the latest prize that you can win courtesy of Football Prizes is, of course, a signed and framed Thierry Henry Arsenal shirt. Quite an incredible prize, as always, when Thierry Henry comes up in these raffles. There is also some instant win prizes to get involved with as well, including a Gilberto signed Arsenal shirt, a Jack Wilshere signed Arsenal shirt, a Tony Adams signed Arsenal shirt, and a Patrick Vieira signed Arsenal photo as well. Best of luck to all of you that get involved. I can tell you that of the 399 tickets that went on sale at the start of the competition less than 12 hours ago, there are indeed only 3 quarters left. A quarter have already been snapped up. So this looks like it's going to be going pretty quickly. So best of luck all to those that get involved. The link is down in today's video description. Well, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Oh, I'll tell you what, I am struggling with hay fever today. It is one of those, unfortunately. It is incredibly tricky to keep at keep at bay. I think I saw a tweet actually from Harry yesterday saying that he is also being currently battered by hay fever, as battered as much as Tottenham are these days. So, yeah, do bear in mind if there's any sniffles or sneezes. I do apologise and hope that I can keep it to myself throughout the course of this show, and I'll mute myself if indeed I need to. But this is the second part of the show, of course, where we go to you guys in the chat box, and during these parts of the window where it is somewhat quieter and the updates on these players are indeed rather minimal, we do jump to the chat box relatively early on in these shows, which means we get through plenty more of your questions. So if you've got one, don't hold back. Get it in there. And make sure, if you haven't done so already, to drop a like on the video. It takes just a second. If you are listening on iTunes, I can tell you that we somehow, this pokey little Arsenal show from a random office down in southeast of England, managed to break into Great Britain's top 200 sports podcasts, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, when you consider the fact that obviously this is mainly a YouTube show and we put out the audio for those to listen to on audio platforms, the fact that, you know, it's somehow done that, and that's sport. That's not just football. That's like any sport. So absolutely ridiculous. Thank you for those that have helped us to do that. And if you would like to drop a review on iTunes or a 5-star rating on Spotify, it helps us get up those rankings, I'm told. So please do. It seems that your efforts have been rewarded, and that's showing up in the. I actually find it really mad. That's crazy to be in the top 200 or whatever it is. So of all sports podcasts, crazy, mad, and our community, of course, is the big reason behind that. Namdi says, who cares? What's with this Chelsea and United always fancying players that Arsenal are linked to? If he wants to go to Chelsea United, let him, please. He will be Mudricked or Antonied if he does. There are plenty of examples to these players of the risk that is involved in not choosing Arsenal and instead opting to move to Chelsea or, of course, to Manchester United, as Namdi so eloquently raises. Amadou Onana says, Tom, by the way, by the time City's charges are heard, the Premier League will raise another loss barrier to 400 billion. It's taking its time, isn't it? Very much taking its time. Olawale says, I hope that we do sign Sesko ahead of Chelsea. Me too. Matt G says, Tom, who would you say is our all-time best ever loan signing? Best ever loan? Kim Kallstrom. Scored that penalty, didn't he, on the way to us winning an FA Cup? Really important penalty. You could definitely give it. I mean, I'm not even joking. He scores a penalty on our way to Arsenal winning their first trophy for 9 years. Really important. In all reality, though, it's definitely Odegaard. It's 100%. It's Martin Odegaard. I don't think it's even a debate. That's still our best loan signing. Jackie says, realistically, if we don't sign Sesko, what striker would you then go for? So in the hypothetical reality that Sesko does indeed choose one of the other teams, it creates a very interesting scenario, because the thing about Sesko is that because of his price tag being so, in quotation marks, low, £55.6 million, what it does mean, of course, is that you then may have to move for a more expensive option like a Gyökeres, who, as I've talked about on the channel before, I very much like Gyökeres and think he's a very good player. But I think I lean towards Sesko as a after a month or so of consideration. I think he probably is rightfully the more priority target of the two, but it then means it could affect what we spend in other areas. So it probably would be someone who's more expensive, but then we may not be able to go and add depth in areas that we need to. So it's something to bear in mind. Michael says, would you consider doing an England news show as a spin-off with the Euros coming up? To be honest, Michael, no. We'll cover England on this show as we move forward. So there's no need to do a spin-off. We will be covering the ins and outs of the European Championships and how they unfold on our morning shows. So don't you worry about that. Prince says, Tom, I'm hearing that Arsenal have 450 million to spend. Is this true? I don't know where you heard that from, but I mean, it's always funny. It's always fun, isn't it, when you're talking about stories that are like, Arsenal have this much to spend, and you're like, well, why would Arsenal tell anyone how much they've got to spend? It doesn't put them in any kind of stronger negotiating position. If anything, it weakens their negotiating position. So I'm afraid wherever you heard that from, they were probably lying. Heavyweight says, Tom, so let me get this straight. I don't mind Sesko coming in. Or are we going for a marquee signing in midfield? If we were going to get an FDJ or a Bruno Guimaraes, get me Fofana. Marquee, depends what you define by marquee. Some people might define Sesko as marquee or Fofana as marquee signings. Others, of course, may not. It depends upon your own definitions. I think that if Sesko comes in, we've got greater capacity to spend in other areas of the team as well, if opposed to assigning Gyökeres or, of course, going and spending our entire budget, which I think it probably would be the majority, if not all of our budget, on someone like Alexander Isak, if indeed you could even get him. So that's the reality of the situation with our spending as well. Roger says 450 million pennies rather than pounds. Indeed. Let's go. Andy says, what's your take on the Man City legal action? Andy, go back and watch yesterday's show. I talk about it at length for quite a long time. So I'm not going to cover old ground. We did it all in yesterday's show. Vanaju says, did you see the Paqueta video of his 4 charges? If he's found not guilty, would you challenge Manchester City for him? Personally, I rate him. I do rate him very highly. I think, again, he's another really expensive player from West Ham, again, upwards of potentially 70, 80 million pounds. It would be interesting to see how this kind of runs through for Paqueta, because the charges are serious, and there's suggestions, of course, that if found guilty, he could be facing a potential lifetime ban, which is mad, really. So Let's wait and see. I think it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for him to escape any punishment at the moment. Just from an honest opinion standpoint, it seems from what I've seen that, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look great at all. Dave says, Tom, there are some rumors flying about Viktor Shigankov, which surfaced yesterday. He looks like a decent option to rotate with Saka. Have you heard anything? I cannot say that I have heard anything about Shigankov on my end. I know that it's been reported by, I think maybe some Spanish outlets. I think he plays for Girona at the moment. He's 26 years of age. Looking on the profile at the moment, 8 goals, 7 assists. So it's a goal contribution every 90 minutes or every other game last season. But it'd be interesting to see if Arsenal move for an older option in the wide area. I say older, 26, of course, not old, but certainly not the Nico Williamses and the Xavi Simons kind of age brackets. It's a different type of profile, but I've heard nothing on that. It's not to say it's not true, but there is obviously those reports that have come out as well. Rob says, don't think West Ham are getting 70 to 80 million for him right now. Yeah, I don't either. Not for a little bit, at least, if indeed he's found not guilty of these alleged charges. Harif says, Tom, did you think this time it will be early transfer signings or will it be deadline day for Arsenal? I think what you'll see is a mix of different timings of deals for Arsenal. I think we'll try and do this Sesko deal, of course, as early as feasibly possible. His release clause runs out on the 30th of June and the Euros start in just over a week's time. So I think Arsenal will be looking to try and do that deal as soon as feasibly possible if they are looking to do it, which we expect them to be. And other than that, it might be that some signings are spread throughout the course of the window, and instead we see Arsenal move later on in the window for certain targets. So look out for that. I think it'll be a spread rather than skewed one way or the other. Ben says we're still heavily linked with Joao Gomez, right? When was the last time a big money Benfica player actually lived up to the hype? I feel like they hoodwink somebody sometimes every other year. Joao Neves, right? Not Joao Gomez. I thought it was Joao Neves that we were being linked to. But Joao Gomez isn't he not the Wolves player? I think Brazilian international Joao Gomez. He's also been linked to Arsenal. Came over from Brazil though, not from Benfica. I like both midfielders. I think they're both very, very talented indeed. Jason says, Tom, do you think Alvarez would be a good option if Sesko doesn't sign? That's if Man City would sell, of course, to Arsenal. There were a lot of rumours yesterday knocking about that Alvarez could indeed leave Manchester City this summer. I don't think that City would have any interest in selling to Arsenal. It would be really counterproductive for them to do so. Would I sign Alvarez? I think I would. Yeah, I do like Alvarez a lot. I think he's a fantastic player. But I'd rather sign Sesko at this moment in time. I think just the thing about Julian Alvarez, right? And I think, as I say, he's very, very talented and he's a versatile player, can play centre forward, can play on the left-hand side or even the right-hand side if you want him to. He scored, I think, got 20 goal contributions last season in the league, which is really good return. But there is always the context of the City factor. I don't know how much that comes into things, especially because Arsenal create plenty of chances. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on Julian Alvarez, because if you look at his numbers, he got 19 goals and 13 assists, which is a staggering number, really. I'm probably underselling him quite considerably. I don't know. But let me know what you think, because I don't know what it is. There's something in my mind there's a little block there with Alvarez. Maybe it's just because I don't think it's realistic, and I just think that there's no way on earth that City would let him leave for us, that I'm already putting kind of something of a block in my mind in place. But when you look at his numbers, like, he's delivering massive outputs. So is that the City factor, or would he be able to replicate that at Arsenal? Do we see the numbers that were produced by Jesus at City and, a failure to replicate that, much to do with injury, of course, at Arsenal? Do we do that again? Do we take that punt on another City forward again? I don't think that you can necessarily look at Jesus and say, oh, well, because Jesus hasn't been a unbelievably good signing, that you can't therefore go and sign Julian Alvarez, because I think that's naive. And I think that signings like Havertz and Jorginho have proven why the likes of Willian were not the be-all and end-all of Chelsea signings either. So I don't think you can conflate the two, but there's something in my mind, I don't know, that's there at the moment that's stopping me from jumping on the Alvarez train. Stuart says, Tom, who would be your wild card signing this summer? Someone in the categories of either Vieira, young and unknown and out the blue, or Ozil-esque super signing of the summer. There aren't really those Ozil types out there this summer for Arsenal, the Alexis Sanchez's. I don't really see Arsenal doing that during this window. So it would be more so the left field options, and in which case, then my knowledge of the Fabio Vieiras of this one, I didn't really know anything about Fabio Vieira when we signed him. So to know, therefore, who the left field pick might be is a bit tricky. I'll have a think, Stuart, and I'll get back to you. The one that popped into my head, I don't think is necessarily left field, but the one that popped into my head was Eberechi Eze, and I don't know why, but that name kind of went into my mind when I was thinking about signings that aren't really being talked about, but you could just suddenly see Arsenal being interested in a player, especially if Vieira and Smith Rowe were to leave. Would Eze suddenly come up as a potential option for Arsenal? There's suggestions that a lot of teams are interested in Eze, of course, and I very much like the player. I think he'd be a really, really astute piece of business by Arsenal. So again, one to look out for. So Nicholas says, Tom, if transfer fees were retroactive, like a pay for play, how much do you think West Ham could have gotten after what he's shown in an Arsenal shirt in regards to Declan Rice? It's just crazy that 100 million seems like a bargain. Yeah, if teams were paid retroactively for signings, do you think you'd ever get into a situation whereby teams then suddenly bench some of their best players to stop, paying the amount of money that they would need to pay to the parent clubs? It would be a terrible system, but I absolutely get where you're coming from, Nicholas. So we would be paying, I think, well upwards of 100 million for Declan Rice at this stage. Mark says, Alex at the Different Knock, who is, of course, a fantastic YouTube channel, which you should all be subscribed to if you're not already, highly rates Marcus Rashford. His recent slump in form notwithstanding. He also rates, great word, by the way, notwithstanding. He also rates De Jong and Fofana for our midfield. What do you think? Well, he's got good taste if he likes Fofana. I wonder where he got that from. But in regards to Rashford, I think that Rashford gets such a bad rap, to be honest, from supporters. I think that Rashford gets, dismissed far too easily for a player that's put away the amount of Premier League goals and got the amount of Premier League assists in a really bad Manchester United side over the last however many years. I would be open to the idea of Rashford coming in. I would be open to giving him a second chance, but the reality is that the financials with Rashford, I just don't think make it feasible nor worth it. So that the financial side of a Rashford deal cancels out all the promise that I think exists in any Rashford deal. Harry says, I'm just afraid Arsenal are taking lots of time negotiating for our transfers and leave it to late in the window. You don't need to worry, mate. The transfers, the recruitment, the business that Arsenal have done have put them into two successive title races, have re-established them as one of the elite sides and one of the favourites for the Champions League, and will be again one of the top 5 favourite sides for the Champions League next season. And that's because of the transfers that we've done, Harry. So no matter how long it takes, no matter how quick it takes, the transfers that Arsenal have done should be giving you the confidence that whatever business we do, it's putting us in very, very good stead for the future. So I wouldn't be too concerned right now, especially not on June 6th. Angus says, which Arsenal player do you think we will impress the most at the Euros? I think the likes of Kivior could be fantastic for Poland, and also Sesko, of course, if we sign him. It's an interesting one, the European Championships. I hope Declan Rice and Saka have great tournaments for England. Ramsdale I don't really expect to play, but both Saka and Rice you'd expect to start the majority of games for England, and I just hope that they stay fit. Saka's obviously not been playing because he's being rested after missing the last day of last season. And then you've got potential signings. Joshua Kimmich will be playing for Germany, of course, one to look out for. Sesko, as you've mentioned, will be playing for Slovenia in this window as well. But Trossard is another one we've already mentioned today. Could be a really important player for Belgium. And Jorginho could come back into that Italy side as they look to is it defend their European Championship title? I think it is. Yeah. So there's a few. There is a few. Saliba, of course. Maybe he'll get some minutes for France. We'll have to wait and see. And then you've got the Copa America, of course, with other players potentially involved too. John says, is there an Emirates Cup this season? There is, from my understanding, a very good expectation that we will see a pre-season friendly at the Emirates this summer, I am told. Derek says, watched Fofana last night. He's very good. I'm not sure about Sesko, if whether or not he's got the X factor in terms of what we need to unlock teams. Also, Bruno will go to City, which is annoying. The thing about Sesko is, as I say, he's just turned 21. He is very much we are signing a player that we see a future for rather than somebody that we think is going to come in and immediately start for us, which is fine. Arsenal scored a record number of goals last season for themselves and only finished 2 points behind City. It's about raising the floor for me this summer. If we can push the needle with the starting 11, great, but we need to push the needle with the overall squad more. In order to be better competitors across all competitions. Pratika says we need to change the narrative about Rice and his price. He wasn't a bargain. He was correctly priced, and the other expensive signings are simply just flops. And I think that's probably a really good way of looking at it, actually, and probably brings us better the context of the market as it should be right now. Rob says, have you any idea what Eberechi's value is? I think he'd be a great addition and look sharp for England. Probably want to get there as quick as possible. His value goes up if Southgate starts to play him. I think you're going to be looking at 60 million upwards for Eze. I think that they are going to look at a lot. Carl says, Tom, where's your guy Ivan Fresneda? Goodness me, that's a name from the past, isn't it? That was last summer, currently playing for Sporting. He did move from Real Valladolid in the end, still only only 19 still years of age. Last season, he didn't get to play too many games for Sporting last season whatsoever. He had a shoulder injury which kept him out for the majority of the season. Has only started to work his way back into the squad, so he's not really been playing all that often at all for Sporting, despite that move from Valladolid, where he was very highly rated. He was being courted, of course, as we know, by Arsenal. He was being courted by Borussia Dortmund as well. But he was only 18 then. He's still only 19 now, so he's got a lot more development still to go. Deck, thank you so much for becoming a brand new member of the channel, and welcome if you haven't already joined, and this is an extension. But if so, thank you and welcome to the TGT family, and thank you for your support. It is incredibly appreciated. Amadou Onana says, all the pundits saying if Saliba gets injured, look out. Isn't Kivior cover for Gabriel and Tommy therefore cover for Saliba? Yes, of course, you've got Timber and White. I think that White could play right-sided centre-back and Timber could play right-back as well. That's also something that I think people forget about rather quickly. Mo says on a 100K, you mean 100 million budget, I think. Sesko 55, Fofana 25, Hato 20. You think Ajax are going to let Hato go for 20 million quid? Whoa. You don't know Ajax. That's all I'll say. Is all I'll say. Mark says, I just saw a report that Hansi Flick is not opposed to selling De Jong if they can get Kimmich. I think De Jong would be an amazing signing if we could put him in our midfield. Can we get Bergkamp to help Arsenal sign De Jong? Now, everyone talks about De Jong, right? Frankie De Jong is a player that is talked about as a 27-year-old player as being considered one of the best players around. Now, he scored 2 goals last season. He got 0 assists. Played 20 games. Now, he had an ankle injury and then another ankle injury. 2 ankle injuries throughout the season, which kept him out and limited to him to just 20 games. Whenever I talk about De Jong, I obviously see a lot of fans pining for him. And to a degree, rightly so. He is a good player. But is there something to be said that maybe the money that it would cost to get De Jong would be probably a massive risk of investment? I think you're looking at, 60, 70, 80 million pounds for De Jong. But he's always spoken about like he's in the class of world-class players. I don't think De Jong is world-class. I don't think he's better than Ødegaard. I don't think he's better than Rice. I don't. So De Jong is a very talented player, but I feel that he is overrated as a player as well. I think he's more of a name than anything else. I think it's the name that gets people excited. We talked about the Ozil-esque type of signing. I think people would see De Jong as maybe something of an Ozil-esque addition to the team, and I'm just not convinced. I'm just not convinced that he would be the right option for us to go for, and I'm not sure that we've seen enough in the last couple of seasons because of a multiple of factors, one being, of course, injuries. And it's interesting, of course, that, we talk about injuries in the channel a lot, and some people don't like Neto because, of course, the injury issues that he's had. But De Jong has also had his fair share of injury issues. And he's not a big goal contributor. Like, in my opinion, we need to be bringing in a level eraser to the midfield to improve our goal output from our midfielders. Last season, Declan Rice did up his output from that position. Havertz didn't really score a lot of goals when in midfield and did so when he moved into the centre forward position. Partey, did Partey score a single goal in any of his appearances last season? I'm not so sure. Did Jorginho score any goals last season? I'm not sure whether he did. And then you've got Erdogan, of course, who did contribute a fair number of goals. But I think the midfield is an area that we are lacking goals. Now, I do think that Rice can score more. And I think that if we do move Rice into the number 8 role, that is potentially an area that we will see him thrive and score potentially 10 or more Premier League goals. But De Jong, if we're thinking about adding a player to the team, De Jong is De Jong's a little bit like Rice, where he can play 6 or he can play 8. I look at him more as an 8, but he's not a regular goal scoring, midfielder. For just having a look back at his previous seasons for Barcelona in the last few years, in 2021, sorry, he scored 3 La Liga goals in 37 games. In 21-22, he got 3 La Liga goals in 32 games. This is for Barcelona, by the way, in La Liga. In 22-23, he got 2 goals in 33 games. And in 23-24, he got 2 goals in 20 games and had a double ankle injury issue, which is, when you're having 2 separate ankle injury issues, it does raise a couple of concerns. So do you see what I mean? I'm just not overly convinced that De Jong would be the option for Arsenal, and that he would be. If Arsenal signed him, I'd be excited, because I think he comes with an aura about him. He comes with that, I wonder what De Jong could do in this Arsenal team, what Arsenal would be like if they had De Jong. But I'm not entirely convinced that he would indeed be the transformative figure for Arsenal midfield, because I frankly want to see goals. And if De Jong comes in, I think that he's more likely to be the 8 than the 6. I could be wrong, but I see him more as a technical box-to-box orchestrator of play than I do a sit in front of the back 4 and play a Rodri type role, which I can see Rice doing either of those things and doing them to a very high level. So, yeah, let's see. The thing about Fofana is that while Fofana is not necessarily known for his goal scoring, I don't necessarily see a midfielder out there that is going to be that transformative, massive goal scorer. But what Fofana brings you, he brings you great depth. He got 8 goal contributions last season, 4 goals and 4 assists in 32 Ligue 1 games. The season before that, in 22-23, he got 2 goals, 2 assists. The season before that, he got 4 assists, no goals. So, again, he's not a massive goal getter. But what he is he's going to be a third of the price of De Jong, potentially at least a third of the price, maybe even more than that. And I think you can then bring in Fofana, be a great option for the midfield, and then you can go out and get the genuine, marquee midfielder when indeed that player becomes available for us, rather than of spending all of your budget on De Jong on a player that may not necessarily be that marquee figure and that we're not entirely convinced by. So there you go. Olawale says, I think Fofana's over, and that's absolutely fine. Entitled to opinions on players. It's just, I just think that the price difference between, Fofana is going to be 20 to 25 million pounds supposedly, and De Jong is going to be upwards of 60 million pounds. I just don't know whether or not it brings enough to the team to justify that. Logan says, how much are the transfer teams putting up smoke screens and diversions for their real players' interest? Or is that not the way this business works? I guess it happens sometimes. I think that ultimately the media can sometimes do the job of the clubs for them. We see so many random links to random players. The amount of times that I've had conversations where it's like, is this player linked? And they're like, oh, we're not going to say whether or not he is linked, when I speak to any contacts of mine at the club, because it is also not that they've said this to me. This is just my own theory, but it is kind of within the club's interest to let things trickle away and flitter away and get people distracted. And, so they're very clever. They know what they're doing. They will certainly confirm if certain players are interested to Arsenal sometimes. Like when I asked about Gyökeres, it was very much he is certainly the profile of striker Arsenal are looking at. And the same was for Sesko and things like this whenever I speak to any contacts of mine at the club. So I think that it's obvious that smoke screens are a thing in the market, but sometimes they're more of the media's own doing than maybe the club's, for instance. Pratika says, I get the sense that Edu and Arteta would be more inclined to spend big on a Premier League player and their limits would be lowered for players from other leagues. And I think you're probably bang on, in terms of that. I think Arsenal have really skewed towards, Arsenal looking at a Premier League proven talent, and that's something that we always have looked to. I think Edu did an interview recently, actually, where he used the words Premier League experience in the description of players that Arsenal would be looking to during this window. Dissent says, you are competing for your major trophies. You can't slip at a transfer 2 to 3 average players for the sake of it. I don't think Arsenal are being linked to any average players at the moment, mate. So I think we're absolutely fine in that regard. I don't see any average players Arsenal are being linked to whatsoever. Fofana's not an average player. Sesko is not an average player. Gyökeres is not an average player. Nico Williams is not an average player. Xavi Simons is not an average player. Neto's not an average player. Thankfully, mate, we're not being linked to any average players. So we'll leave that to Tottenham, I think. Ben says, Nicholas, I'm sorry, but no, doesn't offer enough defensively, and he's been a cone in midfield for the past few seasons. Playing for the name, just like with De Jong. I don't know who that is in response to. Who is the statue in midfield? Was perhaps a better description. I'm trying to scroll up to see who that might be. Kimmich. Oh, Kimmich's a cone in midfield. Are you mad? You've not watched him, mate. Ty says, hi, Tom. Victor Shigankov from Girona, who we are looked to looks a decent amount, and his assists and goal returns are good season on season. Him and Fofana could be good for us, and he is apparently available for under £30 million. We talked about it a little bit earlier on in the show. If Arsenal do want to bring in a wide player, he's not someone that's come up necessarily on my radar, but he's somebody that has improved and impressed at Girona and has got a goal contribution rate, as we discussed, of 1 in 2, which isn't too bad at all. JK Gooner says, hi, Tom. I have to disagree. I think De Jong is world class. Tell me why. Why do you think he's world class? What is it that I'm not seeing? What is it that he does? What is it that Frankie De Jong does that makes him a world class player? Because I don't necessarily think that I've seen enough to suggest that he is, as of yet, a world class player. Passing wise, he's excellent. But defensively, going forwards, he doesn't stand out. I don't think the numbers necessarily stand out for him either. In terms of non-penalty goals, he's in the 64th percentile. In terms of shot creating actions, he's in the 72nd percentile. In terms of tackles, the 69th. Interceptions, the 35th. Blocks, 19th. Clearances, 63rd. Aerial duels, 65. Successful take-ons, 58. Progressive passes recovered, 49. He is very good for his passes attempted, 97. Passes completion, 99. Progressive passes, 96. And progressive carries, 97. So in terms of his passing and the way he's moving the ball, he's got world-class ability. There's no doubt. But overall, for a box-to-box midfielder, which is... I need to see kind of greens across the board, and I'm not seeing those greens for De Jong at the moment. Ben says it's a bit hyperbolic, but Kimmich has been getting criticism for his play as a DM. Bayern fans have said that he's much better when he's moved to right back. But isn't that interesting that we say he's better when he's moved to a position that actually requires more movement than midfield? And yet the argument was that he doesn't move enough. Do you see where the irony is there? Donna says, Mr. Tom, you're a very good-looking man. Are you single and available? No, Donna, I'm not. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I am very much a married man. So I've got a few friends, though. I've got a few single mates. If you need them, they're about. So there you go. Micah says, Tom, I can only think of the current City situation. So it serves us to our standard and trajectory, even more positive amongst fans and in the market. I think that, Mikey, in terms of our current situation, it only serves our players that we need to bring in need to raise the floor. We need to raise that floor. You've got players. And the thing is that fans have been calling, fans have really been calling for the idea that we need to move on your, what's the word? Your Nketiahs, your Nelsons, your Jorginhos, your El Nenis, your Cedrics. We can't move these players on without them raising the floor. We have to raise the floor. And then I get these comments like, we're not making any signings that raise the ceiling. We're not making any signings that push the needle. The reality is that we finished 2 points behind City last season. And it's very hard to push the quality needle of your starters that can close that gap. What is far easier is to raise the floor. And so by raising that floor, you've got a great chance of closing that gap so that when you need to make changes, when you need to substitute, when you need to make differences, you can do that. So, Daniel says, isn't raising the floor technically raising the standards? Winky face, indeed. Kazang says, are you going to be playing Euro Fantasy? Probably. Potentially, I will be, yes. Tend to do that. Do tend to play some form of fantasy across a international tournament. A Trevor Specsavers come to mind. Cheeky boy. Goodness me. I've got my eyes on you, Trev. It's not cool, that. Not cool. My wife likes me. That's all that matters. Mark says, on the departure/potential departure list, midfielders include El Neni, Smith Rowe, Vieira, Partey, Lokonga. If they all go, who would you consider? Zinchenko for the 6th position? What about Noneri? Noneri, of course, I think certainly has to come into the fold next season. We need to sign a midfielder. That's going to be really, really, really important. Ben says, a better question for everyone. Who do we sign that turns those 2 losses against Aston Villa into wins? Now, of course, you could argue that maybe if we'd changed things in the second half, I think we would have done a really important... we would have done an important amount of business to work out how to beat Villa, but we didn't make those changes. We didn't make those changes well enough. I don't think that we necessarily need signings to turn those losses against Villa into wins. I think that we've already got the players to do that. At Villa, we were incredibly unlucky. We were the better team in that game, and we should have had a penalty. It's incredibly frustrating to have not seen us do anything, to not seen us build upon what we've already done. And then you look at the home game, and we should have been up and clear by halftime. Trossard should have scored. I think there was another chance as well, a really high-profile opportunity that we had. I think it might have been a header in the box. There was one when Martinez came out as well, I think, on the left-hand side. So it's Havertz. Did Havertz have a volley over his left shoulder? And we should have been clear by half-time. And then we should have managed the second half better. So all of those things combined, in my opinion, means that we already had the players to win the league last season, and we sadly didn't do it. But we can definitely improve upon the foundations that we've got as well. And we need to make sure that we've got, improvements and reinforcement in the team for next season. I think we're going to end the show there. Thank you so much to you all for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Have a fantastic Thursday. Stay safe. Stay safe. Stay well. And stay happy and respectful as always. Please do drop a like on the video if you could be ever so kind. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning. I'm also going to be joining Egal tonight on his channel for a chat about Arsenal sales as well, I believe. I think that's what we're doing. So make sure you tune in over there too. But thank you for listening. Please do drop a like and leave a review after helping us to break into the top 200. That was pretty crazy. So thank you for that. And as always, up the Arsenal.